Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio, keeping you informed, engaged, and entertained. My name is Michael Spinella, and I'll be your host for the next hour. This is episode 247 of the Canadiens Connection podcast, and I'm very pleased to be joined in the studio by my co-host, the editor-in-chief, the founder, and the president of Rocket Sports, Mr. Rick Stevens. And Rick, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Welcome back, sir. Glad to have you back in the studio, especially on such a busy day. We're in the midst of the QMJHL draft. All 14 rounds taking place in Sherbrooke today. Tonight we got Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. Vegas up 2-1, and it's the last day of the NHL Scouting Combine. It's wrapping up in Buffalo.
And we do have some coverage on the NHL Scouting Combine. The title of today's episode is Hughes Hints at Habs Draft Strategy. We'll get you up to date with everything Montreal Canadiens here in this first segment, plus an update on the Habs prospects. In segment 2, it's the big topic where we're going to be covering the NHL Scouting Combine. Did Kent Hughes send a message at the Combine? That's a good question to ask, and we'll take a look at that. We'll want you to stick around for that big topic segment for sure. In segment 3, it's the Have Your Say segment. We have a listener that reached out to us, so we'll be reading what he had to say, and we have our Canadiens Connection question of the week, and the question is, what's the most important quality to you when selecting a prospect? Size, skill, statistics, testing, performance, character. Let us know. Reach out to us. And Rick, what's the best way for our listeners to reach out to us and let us know?
We get lots of texts from our listeners, and that's because we set up a special Rocket Sports text line for you, available to you 24 hours a day. You can text us at 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. If you got more to say, send us an email. hello@rocketsportsmedia.com.
You can also reach out to us on our social medias. Just give us a follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and check out the website, CanadiensConnection.com. So this past week on June the 9th, it was the 30th anniversary of the Montreal Canadiens defeating the Los Angeles Kings in the playoffs to win their 24th Stanley Cup. The series, Montreal won that 4-1. This was all the way back in 1993. If you can believe it's been 30 years already. Great team overall. Patrick Waugh, Vincent Damphousse, Kirk Muller, and Rick, what's your recollection of this?
Well, it was incredible. A team not expected to compete for the Stanley Cup, but a team that was put together with a lot of character players, with Patrick Waugh, and a very determined, competitive bunch who won 10 overtime games in a row to take that Stanley Cup, and maybe got some help along the way. And we remember the Marty McSorley illegal stick call, and that maybe turned the series. Wayne Gretzky controlled during that series. It was incredible. It's hard to believe that it was 30 years ago on Friday when we heard Bob Cole's famous call.
And now a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
And that's the siren at the end of the game, as was customary at the old Forum. Of course, the Canadiens haven't had Stanley Cup success since moving to the Bell Center. The Molson Center first, then became the Bell Center. And not only is it 30 years since the Montreal Canadiens won a Stanley Cup, it's 30 years since a Canadian franchise has won the Stanley Cup. So who knew back in 1993 that this there would be such a drought? And so it's it's kind of a double-edged sword there, remembering both the power of that moment, but also it's sad. It's sad for a franchise like the Montreal Canadiens that it's been 30 years, and for another time we'll look at why that exists and why it's been so hard for the Canadiens to win a Stanley Cup. I think the only thing I'll say is that it's difficult for any team to win the Stanley Cup, but winning the Stanley Cup has to be your primary focus, and that hasn't always been the case in Montreal.
So make sure you're checking out Habs Notepad and Habs headlines throughout this busy offseason at habshockeyreport.com. This past week, we had some big news drop. On Monday, the Canadiens signed forward Cole Caufield to an 8-year contract extension worth $62.8 million. So I can officially stop ripping out my hair on a daily basis. It's nice that Cole's going to be around on a long-term deal. Honestly, I felt like this was headed towards a bridge deal, but nice to see that it seems like a pretty team-friendly number. It's a long-term contract. I think that speaks to the state of the Montreal Canadiens' internal culture. Cole Caufield seems to be having a good relationship with Nick Suzuki. Maybe that's a part of it. But it's nice to see that Montreal was able to lock down a star long-term.
Yeah, you're right. And I think this is, as is being said, a good deal for all, that they got it just right. Cole Caufield seems happy. He said he explored with his agent all the possibilities, but that he wanted a minimum of 6 years. He didn't want a short-term deal. He understood that there was the potential of perhaps making more money after the cap went up, but that wasn't part of his mindset. That he was always looking for a lengthy deal, and this buys his best years. He's going to be under contract between the years of 22 and up to age 30, and if he can reach his potential, 40 goal potential, then this is a bargain for the Canadiens. Of course, on the other side, there's injury risk. There's risk associated with the size of the player, and that he hasn't yet. He's been on track, but he hasn't reached that 40 goal mark, or maybe more. But I think this was right. The Canadiens had a salary hierarchy, and they wanted their captain to be their top paid player, and so it's just a hair difference, $25,000 difference, and Cole Caufield comes in just under that.
Yeah, so let's hear from Cole Caufield himself on what it's like to sign a contract worth $62 million.
To be honest, it really doesn't make sense to me. It's something that I could have just dreamed about as a kid, but even this number probably wouldn't even have popped into my head. I mean, I just love to watch and to be able to do this in a place like Montreal for that amount of money. I mean, put the money aside, I just love being in Montreal, but it's huge to kind of have my family safe and things like that. So I couldn't be more proud. My parents are very excited. My family's all excited. So I think we're in a really good spot.
Now, Cole Caufield is not necessarily, his interviews are pretty straight, typically. You don't get big quotes out of him, but I think this is as excited as he's been in an interview, and why not, signing a almost $63 million contract. And I thought it was great the way he framed it, that this was not only important for him, but important for his family. His parents who have supported him, and coming from a modest background, and his brother, and it was a time for the family to celebrate. Now, he didn't find out just Monday morning. He said that the news came, and when he got the news from his agent that the contract was completed, he gave a call to his mom, who was at work, a teacher. And he said she was busy, so she had to call him back. even with such monumental news. I thought that was kind of you get a sense of the family and what's important to them and their priorities. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, it's a cute little story, and nice to hear Cole Caufield be very excited at an interview. I wonder how long it's going to be before we get another excited Cole Caufield interview like that. We have one more quote coming from Cole, and he's talking about how this contract won't change him.
I mean, honestly, it's not going to change anything about who I am, anything like that. I think just coming to the rink every day, I do it for free. So my passion for the game, it's never going to change. I'm really excited, and obviously it's really special for me and my family. But at the end of the day, I just love being a hockey player.
That's a great answer. I love being a hockey player. I do it for free. Now, you don't say that in contract negotiations, but that level of excitement, and let's hope he can stick to his word that the money isn't going to change him and not going to change his love for hockey. He was asked how he was going to celebrate, and he said that he was on in the ice, he had a workout, and he was going to take a nap to celebrate. So that was a pretty down to earth response. Just as far as his recovering from shoulder surgery, he said that he had been cleared 10 days prior by the doctors for full activity. We saw him playing. We reported on it last week that he was playing pickleball. He said he's been skating 2 or 3 times a week for the last 4 or 5 weeks. So he expects to be ready once training camp comes around in the fall.
Yeah, nice to hear that he's taking the summer to do some working out and whatnot. I hope his celebration nap went very well. And very excited to watch this player next season. And you just hope that he's able to stay healthy and hopefully play a full 82 games this year. We haven't been able to see that yet from him, although it does feel like he's been around for a while yet, going all the way back to when he played in that big playoff run, and he was a key factor. So I think we're all very excited that Cole Caufield's sticking around for another 8 seasons.
Absolutely.
So let's get to our Habs prospect report.
This edition of the Rocket Report is brought to you by AHL.Report, your premier source for the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens. AHL.Report is a proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network.
So some interesting news coming out of the QMJHL. A few weeks ago, we talked about how they were looking into banning fighting from the Q, and they just put in some new sanctions to try and prevent it. I'll read them off here. 4 different rules to go through. Addition of a game misconduct penalty for any player involved in a fight. Number 2, addition of an automatic 1-game suspension for any player declared to be an instigator of a fight. Number 3, addition of a minimum 2-game automatic suspension for a player identified as an aggressor. And number 4, in addition to the game misconduct, an automatic 1-game suspension will be imposed once the player has reached his 2nd fight rather than his 3rd. So the Q really trying to crack down on this. Be interesting to see how this goes. I feel like there will be a bit of an adjustment period for players to really catch on and understand how this is going to work. Rick, where do you stand on this?
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily understand the difference between an instigator and an aggressor, but we'll let them sort that out. This was coming. It has a political force behind it in the Quebec legislature. You had a private member, Enrico Ciccone, former tough guy in the NHL, has turned 180 degrees and is now against fighting. You had the Quebec Minister of Sport who said, that's it, no more fighting. The new commissioner in the Q came out and said, we will have no more fighting. And so you knew this was coming, even though there was some pushback from important players, and Nick Suzuki was one of them, saying, this is a bad idea. However, the political momentum has carried this. It's happening, and so far, nothing from the OHL, WHL doesn't plan to change. So we'll see this little experiment, how it unfolds this coming season in the Q.
If we want to move just a little bit to the west to the OHL, just last week the OHL named all-star teams. There are a few familiar names on that list. Rick, who are they?
Owen Beck is named to one of the all-star teams, as is Logan Mailloux. Both, we know Owen Beck made it to the Memorial Cup. Logan Mailloux had a terrific season with the London Knights. The only other thing I'll add here is once the NHL playoffs are over, then Logan Mailloux is going to receive an invitation to meet with Gary Bettman. And if Gary Bettman is satisfied with what Logan Mailloux says, then he'll be permitted to make the next jump from junior to either the AHL or the NHL, depending on how his training camp with the Canadiens goes.
Circling back to the Q, the Quebec Remparts beat the Seattle Thunderbirds to win their third Memorial Cup championship. The head coach of this team is Patrick Waugh, so I guess a nice way to celebrate his 30-year anniversary of the Stanley Cup. The Quebec Rempart got goals from 5 different skaters during the final game to help them win the Memorial Cup there. And pretty good team. I don't think there were any Habs prospects on the Ramparts. On the Seattle Thunderbirds, though, it is Jared Davidson that unfortunately had the losing effort. Jared Davidson was definitely a standout throughout these Memorial Cup tournaments, though.
For sure. The Quebec Remparts played really well, and Seattle Thunderbirds were a powerhouse offensive team, and Quebec shut them down twice, both in the round robin and then in the final. So full credit to Patrick. He got a Gatorade shower and didn't have a hair out of place afterwards. And we'll keep a watch on Patrick Waugh to see if now he is a candidate for one of the available coaching positions in the NHL, something he desperately wants. But back to Jared Davidson, an incredible season, an incredible junior hockey career. And it's amazing because we talked about him early this season on this podcast when nobody else was, because we were very impressed by his talent. He's very well respected on his team. He's known as Mr. Thunderbird. And I thought it would be interesting to hear from Seattle Thunderbirds head coach Matt Odette on just what kind of player he's been for that franchise.
For the guy that has been with us from day one, Jared Davidson, a guy that was undrafted, has a 16-year-old, made our team as a 16-year-old, and just to see him develop into the player that he became, and NHL draft pick, unbelievable leader, unbelievable human being, and just proud, and he'll be known as one of the best T-Birds that we've had, and once again excited to see his career unfold at the pro level.
Yeah, it really will. And when he says he was undrafted, of course drafted by the Canadiens, but undrafted at the WHL level, a walk-on there, and so we'll see what happens. Remember, he still has to be signed, but it would be real strange if that didn't happen, and very interesting to see what he does at camp, and if he's able to jump to the Laval Rockets in the fall. I think he's been a tremendous player, and it's been a pleasure for us to follow him all throughout this season.
Yeah, a bit of an underrated prospect, not somebody that gets talked about a whole lot, maybe overshadowed a little bit by Joshua Waugh and Riley Kidney in the Q, but Jared Davidson, in terms of the CHL, he's right up there with those two. So like we're all saying, very excited to see how this unfolds, and I would hope that the Montreal Canadiens give this guy a contract. For sure.
We noticed that some of the reporters on the French side are calling him the new Raphael Harvey-Pinard. So let's see if that's a label that sticks.
Yeah. Moving over to the AHL news, the Calder Cup final is underway. It's going to be the Hershey Bears versus Coachella Valley Firebirds. Coachella Valley is the affiliate for the Seattle Kraken, and it's actually their first year in the AHL, so setting the bar pretty high for themselves, being able to reach the finals in their first season.
For sure. And as always, we'll have coverage of that Calder Cup final and how it relates to the Laval Rocket and the AHL in general, and the way prospects are developed. I know that Patrick Waugh is... Patrick Waugh... I don't know where Patrick Waugh is, but I know that our own Patrick is out in Coachella Valley and following this tournament, the AHL Guru, and he'll be back in Hershey to report on that. And you can hear his discussion with Amy on the Press Zone podcast that comes out every Tuesday.
And just a little note here from the Laval Rocket. They have signed defenseman Olivier Galipeau to a 1-year AHL contract. Last season, Galipeau split the season between the AHL and the ECHL 12 Riviere Lions. I think we both agree that he's probably better suited as an ECHL guy, and it's a little bit surprising to see the Rocket sign him so early on in this offseason.
Especially signing him to a one-way AHL contract. A little odd. As you said, his experience is primarily in the ECHL. 3 times as many games as in the AHL, 222 games in the ECHL, 72 in the AHL. And the only reason we mention that is because we want to make sure that the Laval Rocket, we understand they have to please their fans in Laval, but also it's a place for development and have to reserve spots for their prospects.
So be sure to read all the content at ahl.report and listen to and subscribe to the Press Zone. That's hosted by Amy Johnson and our AHL guru, Patrick Williams. Comes out every single Tuesday, and they've been doing a good job of covering the AHL all season. When the Rocket are playing, that's one of the main focuses, but in these playoffs, they've had plenty of other good topics to talk about. Throughout these weeks leading up to the NHL entry draft, we have been giving little updates that are relevant to the Montreal Canadiens fans. The last few podcasts, we started talking about the mise au jeu odds. That's how you can bet in Montreal on sports. And, they have some odds on the players that Montreal could draft. Right now, leading the way, it looks like it's Will Smith. And Rick, what are your thoughts on how this is looking?
Well, it's kind of fun, but it's also where people are willing to put their bets. Run by Lotto Quebec, they put out these odds. Will Smith was behind Michkov last week when we reported on it. He's bumped to the favorite this week, jumped up from an odds standpoint of 4.5 to 3 even. Michkov stays steady at 4. And following Michkov, then it's David Reinbacher, the prospect that the Montreal Canadiens fans don't want to see, apparently, according to our comments. And then after Reinbacher, it's Ryan Leonard and Dalibor Dvorsky.
So, yeah, this is an interesting thing to keep an eye on. I'm not sure where mise au jeu comes up with their odds, but it is pretty interesting to see Will Smith jump up. And after everything we're about to talk about in terms of the draft combine, I wonder if we see Ryan Leonard take a little jump up next week when we cover this.
Perhaps. So
stick around for segment 2. We'll give you the full update on that. But before we get there, we do have some hockey news and notes from around the league. Danny Briere, the GM of the Philadelphia Flyers, has completed his very first trade as the head GM, and it's actually a 3-team trade. So the Flyers receive a 2023 first-round pick from Columbus, a 2024 second-round pick from the LA Kings, and a conditional 2024 second-round pick from Columbus as well as goaltender Cal Peterson, defenseman Sean Walker, and Hal Granz. The Columbus Blue Jackets receive Ivan Provorov, the Kings receive Hayden Hodgson, Kevin Connaughton, and 30% of Provorov's salary. So this is an interesting trade all around. One might look at this and think, oh, Philly's acquired a goaltender. What does that mean for Carter Hart? We'll circle back to that in just a little bit. I don't want to give too much away, but Rick, how do you feel about this big trade?
Well, 3-team trades are so easy. So, Danny Briere jumped in, and that's his first trade as a GM. Unbelievable in my mind. And actually, you can understand this trade, what each team got. Whether you agree with it or not, you can understand why it was accomplished. And Briere this is obvious. They're in a rebuild now, and what he wanted were the draft assets, getting another first-round pick, getting perhaps a couple of second-round picks. The other players, Cal Peterson, signed to a terrible contract and had a really rough season. It was going to be difficult for the Los Angeles Kings to part with him and make some cap room. They managed to do this, unloading Cal Peterson in this deal. So the Kings got what they needed. They wanted cap space, even taking on some of Provorov's salary. They still had enough cap space to go out and sign Gavrikov to a new 2-year deal, which was their aim. The reason they got involved in this. They take on a couple of players that probably aren't going to be used. And for Columbus, they're wanting to rebuild their blue line, it appears. And bringing in Provorov, is he the guy? Is he still a number one defenseman? Well, that's debatable. But you have a new coach coming in Mike Babcock, who's going to want a strong blue line and want options on the blue line. So you bring in Provorov. The next day, Columbus goes out and acquires Damon Severson from New Jersey. And you start seeing this blue line that they're putting together in Columbus. Werenski and Severson, Provorov, and perhaps Juracek. They still have Gabranson and Boquist and Blankenberg. All of these as options for Mike Babcock. And if it doesn't make sense to some fans, it seems to make sense to the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, I like the Damon Severson trade with the New Jersey Devils. The Blues only giving up a 3rd-round pick and then immediately signing Severson to an 8-year deal. That's pretty big. I do like Severson as a defenseman. That'll certainly help them improve that. Very excited to see how everyone gets along with Mike Babcock. I don't really know what to expect from Babcock returning to the NHL. Circling back a little bit to Cal Peterson, the goalie that the Flyers acquired. Last year, he was touted as a guy that could be their next number one, the guy that could be taking over for Jonathan Quick, and he became basically unplayable to the point where LA just kept him off the roster, and he's basically a salary dump here. LA having to give up a couple draft picks here in order to get him off the books. If you're the Flyers, potentially a reclamation project and a goalie, or the guy that gives you the first overall pick next season. We'll wait and see on that one.
And there's a key point here in that Severson trade that you mentioned, in that New Jersey signed him to an 8-year deal before they traded him. And because obviously he could not get that same 8-year term on a new contract with Columbus. So keep that in mind. The sign and trades may become something relevant to the Montreal Canadiens as we go forward here.
Yeah, I like the sign and trade move. I thought Severson was somebody that could have gone for a little bit more than a 3rd-round pick, but I don't think that New Jersey was in a spot where they could be negotiating too much. It seems like Damon Severson was really, really wanting to go to Columbus. Personally, I wouldn't want to go to Columbus, but that's just me. But excited for Severson to see what he can do there.
You don't like cannons? Is that it?
Yeah, I'm pretty jumpy, so moving over to Toronto. Toronto have hired a special advisor to the GM, and that is Shane Doan. So the longtime Coyotes captain has gained quite a bit of hockey ops experience over the past few years, and it looks like he could be coming into Toronto as the new Jason Spezza role. So you know what, Shane Doan, very smart guy. He's been around for a while, and I'm curious to see what the new dynamic is there with Shane Doan and Brad Treliving.
Known as Mr. Coyote, and he's been with the organization so long after they relocated from Winnipeg. And as you say, a real smart guy, has got experience with hockey ops with Arizona, but also with Hockey Canada. He's been part of the management of several teams and has done a pretty good job there as well. So a good move. Sad to say, but I think it's a good move by the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. I feel like we think a lot of things are good moves, but as time kind of goes along, we find out maybe not. So we'll see. We'll monitor that one. Circling back to the Flyers, GM Danny Briere let it know that he will be listening to offers on goaltender Carter Hart. So not too long ago, we did talk about the idea of Carter Hart coming to Montreal. This is a young goaltender. He came into the league and he looked great. You saw that he could easily be one of the best in the NHL. Last couple seasons on a very bad team, you can kind of tell that he's lost his confidence a bit. He's not that same goalie that he once was, but he's still very, very young. He'll be probably a reclamation project for whoever acquires him. Does this make sense for Montreal? I mean, I think he'd come in and probably be better than both Jake Allen and Sam Montembeault. But as a long-term project, is this somebody that would be able to handle the pressure of being in Montreal? What are your thoughts on this one, Rick?
Those are all good questions. And first of all, it should be obvious. I hope it's obvious that he has a far higher ceiling than a Sam Montembeault. Younger, he's 24 years old. Sam's 26, and just even on a bad team, he's had a much better career than Sam. He's played in a lot more games, 201 career games, a career 296 goals against, and a 906 save percentage. I think that there's a bit of, as I've said before, Sam had a decent season, and on the team that he was on, he performed well, but 342 goals against, 901 save percentage, 16-22 record, and has only played 103 career games in the NHL. Carter Hart, got to see a lot of Carter Hart when we were traveling in the AHL, and he was coming out of junior with huge promise. CHL goaltender of the year, and in the AHL, I thought he struggled, and he struggled mostly because of his focus, lack of focus. He'd get lost, or he'd get in his head about a goal he had given up or a save that he had made, and he seemed to psych himself out. And I would have liked to have seen him play a lot more in the AHL, but Philadelphia was in their goaltending core was ravaged by injuries. They brought him up to the NHL far too soon. And funny, he actually performed better in the NHL than he did in the AHL. But he's had a sports psychologist since he was very young. And that always seemed to be his issue, is keeping focus and the mental part of the game. Having said that, he's a follower of Carey Price, one of the very best technical goaltenders in the league. But if he's having issues with mental focus and confidence in Philadelphia, how is it going to be under the spotlight in Montreal? That's a question I can't answer. I think the other part of this is that Danny Briere said Yes, Carter Hart's available as other players are, even a Travis Konechny, and he's kind of backed off that a bit, and it's because he wants a king's ransom for Carter Hart. The Philadelphia media are reporting that he wants either 2 first-round picks or the equivalent for a Carter Hart. And is that the place that the Canadiens want to spend their draft capital?
Yeah, that's a pretty steep price. I was going to say if there was a little bit of a discount and if this was buying low on Carter Hart, who had a bit of a difficult season, then I could see that as a viable option. But if you're asking for 2 first-round picks or the equivalent, I just don't think it's valuable for the Montreal Canadiens to go out and make that trade. That's my thought anyway.
I'm also seeing on both social media and in the media, there's some articles written that no, the Canadiens don't need to go after Carter Hart. Get a younger a goalie with high potential. And listen, all Kent Hughes has to do is pick up the phone, and he can have his just take his pick of a Devin Levi or a Yaroslav Askarov or Jesper Wallstead, top prospect in the AHL last year, Dustin Wolf in Calgary. There's plenty of young goaltenders out there. Just go grab one. Just go make a trade for one. I'm afraid to disappoint you, but those goaltenders aren't available, and they aren't available for a reason.
If you turn on the PS5 and open up GM mode, I'm sure they could be available that way. But in this scenario, I don't think so. I don't think the Sabres are looking to move on from that. And quite frankly, if you are going after one of those goaltenders, it's going to be a similar price, if not more, right?
Absolutely. And listen, it's what we talked about last week with Jerome Berube, that this is one of the best crop of goaltenders at the draft in some years. And so perhaps that's where the Canadiens will look for their goalie of the future.
So, more trade speculation, and this one, it always comes back to this, but Pierre LeBrun is reporting that the agent of Pierre-Luc Dubois has advised the Jets general manager, Kevin Cheveldayoff, that he will not sign another contract with Winnipeg. So that means not a one-year contract as a bridge deal or a long-term contract, anything like that. He's looking for a trade right here, right now. LeBrun it's also reported here that the ask for that Pierre-Luc Dubois has for a contract is $9 million roughly, and that seems pretty steep for a center that's a 60-point center. I think that's probably where he peaks out. Good player. I don't see the fit here with Montreal if that's what people are looking at. It always seems like the moment Pierre-Luc Dubois trade rumors come around, people link him back to Montreal. I personally just don't see the fit here. I think Montreal has a good top 2 centers in Nick Suzuki and Kirby Dach. You look at what it would cost to get Pierre-Luc Dubois from Winnipeg, and Kevin Cheveldayoff is a guy that he more often than not seems to get the price that he's looking for. He's not just handing out Pierre-Luc Dubois in exchange for Armia and a second-round pick. That's not going to be how it goes. I think this trade probably starts with a first-round pick and a top prospect along those lines. Rick, what are your thoughts on Pierre-Luc Dubois?
This story, it just won't go away. And you've got to be concerned about a player who has essentially engineered trades out of 2 NHL teams, Columbus and Winnipeg, and I know you're going to say, well, look at those franchises. I hate to break it to you, but they're NHL franchises. There's only, 700 NHL jobs in the world. And to be one of those players and yet to pout and walk away and maybe not perform to your potential while you're blessed to have one of those jobs, you know how many players we've talked to at other levels, at the AHL level or ECHL level, who never got the opportunity to play one game. that's got to be concerning, very concerning that I'll only play for who I want to play for. But especially, I think most of us were expecting that, Pierre-Luc Dubois would sign he's an RFA this summer. He would sign a 1-year contract and then give the opportunity for Kevin Cheveldayoff to trade him during the year, perhaps prior to the trade deadline. But no, he wants out now, and then that's with his dad in the organization as well. So this is really odd. It puts the Jets in a difficult position. But as you said, Kevin Cheveldayoff has been in this position before. Jacob Trouba comes to mind, and he's not going to just give this player away. The other thing is that Pat Brisson, the agent, has said, at least through the reporting in The Athletic, both Arpon Basu and Pierre LeBrun, that they will provide a list of let's say 6 teams where Pierre-Luc Dubois would be interested in going to. So it's not only the Montreal Canadiens. There will be other bidders in this process. And the difficulty here, too, is going to be not only the assets that will be given up for him, but the salary demands. And we hear that he's looking for. The situation will probably be like Severson in a sign and trade situation. $9 million at 8 years is the ask. He's said that he will adjust the salary down for a contending team, but at that level for a rebuilding team like the Canadiens. So who are the teams that may be interested? Montreal for sure. He has said that he likes the Big Apple. He likes the atmosphere with the New York Rangers. It's also speculated that Dallas might be interested. Minnesota, the LA Kings, who we're talking about, Colorado, who are going to have injury problems and might be wanting to add him to the mix. But that $9 million, as you said, $9 million for a 60-point player at this stage. And having to give up some assets. Now, we remember that to acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois, the Jets gave up Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic, both first-round picks, to bring him in. So they're going to be looking for something substantial. We heard that they asked for Kirby Dach, and why wouldn't they? They have to replace Pierre-Luc Dubois, and they might have to replace Mark Scheifele as well this summer. So why wouldn't they ask for a Dach? Yes, the Habs 5th overall pick plus. This is, I don't know. The other thing, and I know that there was a text that I got that said, don't worry, Hughes is not going to be interested in Pierre-Luc Dubois because he won't pay more for Dubois, won't meet his demands at $9 million because remember the salary hierarchy with Suzuki at the top and Caufield. And interestingly enough, we're going to talk more about the Combine and more about what Kent Hughes said, but he corrected that and he said that both Caufield and Suzuki were coming off entry-level contracts, and that's why the salary structure was the way it is. That hierarchy would not apply to a player a year away from UFA status or perhaps a UFA. So there is a difference there, whether fans understand that difference or not. This is complicated. It's not going to go away, and that doesn't even get into the whole discussion. Do the Canadiens need, if you can keep a Kirby Dach, do the Canadiens need a Pierre-Luc Dubois? There's lots of angles to this story, and we're going to be talking about it for a while yet.
Yeah, the part I just get hung up on is that he's making a lot of big demands for a 60-point center, and I think at times he's been more of a number 2 guy in Winnipeg. So it's a big ask. I hope this doesn't become a trend around the NHL where guys are starting to make these big demands as RFAs. But yeah, we'll keep you monitored, and I'm sure this will come up many times throughout the summer, right?
Absolutely. Well, I should say we're likely to see this happen by the end of the month, probably by the draft, because the Jets certainly don't want an offer sheet dropped on Pierre-Luc Dubois and have to match that. So we're likely going to see some resolution in the next few weeks.
Yeah, would be very nice. But we will get to our talk about the NHL Scouting Combine in just a little bit. But first, we'll hear a message from our sponsors, DraftKings, and make sure you stay with us. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Light the lamp during the hockey playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers can make a $5 bet and score $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, KS. 21 and over in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling sources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/hockey terms.
Welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. I'm Michael Spinella, and you can find me on Twitter at The Spinella. With me in the studio is the president and founder of Rocket Sports, Rick Stevens. Make sure to give him a follow on Twitter at Rocket Sports. You can also follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Plus, you can check out the website, CanadiensConnection.com. Also, just a reminder here to hit that subscribe button in the player on your favorite podcast app so that you never miss a single episode. And as we've talked about a few times off the top of the show, the NHL Scouting Combine was underway this week. In fact, today, June the 10th, is the last day of it. So we got to see plenty from some of the top draft eligible prospects in 2023. Some of these prospects, including Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, Will Smith, and Leo Carlson, experienced Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final in Vegas, and they got to talk to the media as well. They seem like pretty good guys. I honestly, listening to their interview that got broadcasted, I would think that they're all like really good friends and very tight knit. But very interesting guys, and what we are here to talk about, though, is the 2023 NHL Scouting Combine that was held at KeyBank Center in Buffalo this past week, June the 4th to June 10th. 106 draft-eligible prospects participated in a week-long event ahead of the NHL draft at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville on June 28th and 29th. And for those who don't know, the NHL Scouting Combine is a pretty big event. The Combine will allow NHL teams an opportunity to conduct interviews and provide physical and medical assessments to all of the top draft-eligible prospects in 2023. The schedule for this week, anyway, on June the 4th, it's arrivals. On the 5th to the 9th, all 32 NHL teams are eligible to meet with the players for one-on-one interviews. On the 7th, it's medical examinations. On the 9th, media availabilities. And, of course, on the 10th, there are some physical evaluations. So, Rick, seems like there's not been a ton of coverage on it this year. I felt like last year there was a lot of talk with Shane Wright and Uri Slavkovsky, but not too much this year. Have you been able to follow it at all?
Well, then you missed this tweet by our dear friend Russ Cohn. at Sportsology on this morning, just ahead of some of those physical tests. He was following Caden Price. Caden Price, one of the defensive prospects, played in the CHL this past year for the Kelowna Rockets. And Russ tweeted, Caden Price puked up his breakfast before the Wingate test today. Hashtag 2023 NHL draft before the Wingate test. So it's the Combine is an interesting event, and it's, as you said, sometimes it's underreported. Sometimes it goes unnoticed by NHL fans, hockey fans in general. But it's a really important last look at the prospects before the teams make their draft selections. Real nice complex in Buffalo, both the KeyBank Center, the NHL rink, and the Harbor Center, which is attached, which is their practice facility. And from all over come these 106 prospects. There's all the GMs, all the scouts, media are there, although you wouldn't know this year, there, and follow these prospects, just looking for a new piece of information that they don't already have. People were following with great interest this morning about the height measurements of some of the players. And yeah, there's the medicals, the physical tests, the character interviews. The Canadiens are famous for their character interviews run by sports psychologist Dr. David Scott. And his favorite question is, what kind of animal are you? We'll hear some answers to that in a second. And there's also the informal interviews, the dinners that happen. Remember, famously, Yuri Slavkovsky said he didn't get a dinner, but what he got, the conversation he got, was better than dinner last year. So it's a chance to just glean any extra information from the prospects as the teams make their final decisions.
And I think one thing I will point out right off the top is Michkov was not attending the Combine due to his Russian background. They've not had Russian background players at the Combine the last couple of years at least. But there has been plenty of news about Connor Bedard. Rick, I don't know if you've heard about this Connor Bedard kid, but he seems to have completely stolen the spotlight here at the NHL Scouting Combine. Actually, this morning on Saturday the 9th, he was maxing out the VO2 bite test, and there's a little video of him. And he looks like he's struggling, but he's doing a pretty good job. I guess he's quite athletic.
That's a miserable test, just an absolutely miserable test.
No one looked like they were enjoying it. They had all the prospects on this video, and it just looked brutal. I would never want to do this test personally. A couple guys, sorry?
I was just going to say the scary thing, the scariest comment I heard this week from Connor Bedard was that he was going to spend the summer learning how to score more goals, that he was going to figure out how he could score more goals net front, that he wanted to add that to his repertoire for next season. So, look out for that.
Yeah, there might honestly just be nothing he can't do by the time he gets to the NHL. So pretty excited about that. A couple players that did not participate in the final day workouts are Adam Fantilli and Leo Carlson. Not sure how that will end up impacting things, but is something that's worth noting. To me, I think the big part about the Combine that would be interesting to fans is the interviews. Like, Montreal does have a pretty high draft pick, picking number 5. They also have a second first-round pick that's probably going to be 31 or 32. And it's interesting to see some of the players that they do reach out and provide interviews to. You mentioned that sometimes they'll do informal ones, going out to lunch or something. Has been reported that Ryan Leonard, Zach Benson, and Gabriel Perreault have not eaten with the Montreal Canadiens, at least as of Thursday night. But a few players that they did reach out to for interviews. They had Dvorsky, Will Smith, Colby Barlow, Ryan Leonard, Matthew Cataford, Carson Bjarnason, Kalen Lind. They're really just covering all their bases for those first two first-round picks, and they do have some interesting questions. Rick, you mentioned this off the top of the show. What's the Canadiens' approach to the interview?
Well, it's trying to ask offbeat questions that they wouldn't be able to prepare for. One of them has become quite famous in what kind of animal would you be, trying to figure out how they view themselves, what their on and off ice persona is. Kent Hughes said, they every year they hear lion as a typical answer, and I think this year they've outlawed that answer. But he said that they've this. I think now that prospects know this question is coming, so he said we're hearing far more interesting answers this year than we have in the past. I saw that goaltender Michael Rabel was asked, and he was asked. He said he was asked this question. It had to have come from the Canadiens. What animal he compare himself to? He said off ice a panda. Because he's calm and focused. On ice, he's a gorilla. And keep in mind, we've talked about Michael Rabel before. He's 6'6". So that seems to fit pretty well. You noticed one as well.
Yeah, Ryan Leonard was asked the same question. It seems like it's almost like a two-parter where which animal are you off ice and on ice? For Ryan Leonard, he said off ice that he's a shark. He's a pretty big leader in the dressing room and kind of a go-getter. And then on the ice, he's just a beast, which I think that's a pretty good answer. I don't know if a beast really qualifies as an animal, but I think that gets the point across, and that really does speak to the style of play that he has.
I think that just to say those weren't the only questions that were asked. They're really trying to dig down and find out about the character of these prospects, and also whether they can handle the pressure of being under the spotlight in a hockey crazed town like Montreal, and be able to stand up to the pressure and the almost interrogation at times by the media. Dalibor Dvorsky was asked, whether the questions were tough, and he said, no. He said, I had fun. They asked good questions. I hope I offered good answers. I thought it was odd that Leo Carlsson, if you know, he speaks multiple languages, but in English, he stutters. He also stuttered in Swedish, but he's gotten past that, and he said that he just gets more nervous in English, and that the Montreal Canadiens actually asked him about his stutter, and they're the only team to have done that. But perhaps that was all about finding out how he would be able to respond to the media. He was also asked his favorite Canadiens player. And he said he admired PK Subban.
That's an interesting pick. I like that. The Montreal Canadiens, depending on which prospect you talk to, some are saying that they're the more difficult interview. Others are saying just like that. They had fun with it. It wasn't too bad, and they kind of knew what they were expecting, especially after last year. The Montreal Canadiens made headlines for asking some pretty odd questions. I think this year they've toned that down a little bit, didn't they, Rick?
Yeah, that's what Kent Hughes said, that they didn't like that reputation, so they've made the questions a little more straightforward this year.
Yeah, and Kent Hughes did have a bit of a shorter press availability based on some of the lengths of some of the other press availabilities we've had from him in the past. The majority of it was in French. Not a whole lot came in English, unfortunately, but we did get to hear his thoughts on a few different things. He talked about a few different players that he liked, and he talks about his strategy approaching this draft. We'll circle back to this one, but I think the one that I think we should be keeping in mind here is he said, I think at the end of the day, we want the best player available. So I won't spoil too much because we're going to circle back to what that could mean a little bit later.
Yeah, who is the best player, and how do they determine the best player? He spent a lot of time talking about Matvei Michkov, and I think, and in addition to other players, and I think, I mean, it's normal for media, it's normal for fans to try and interpret, what does this mean? Can we figure out from what he said, whether they're choosing Michkov, whether they're not, I would say he was pretty cautious. Translated, he said, with Russian players, there is the geopolitical element and his contract status. We know he's signed with a KHL team for 3 years. And so he said, Kent Hughes said, we have to do our homework. However, we have to evaluate him first and foremost as a hockey player and compare him to the other players. So I think that was the most important part of what he said is, yes, that's going to factor in those off-ice issues and the atmosphere in Russia and the contract status, but he must be evaluated on his talent and with all in all the aspects, how he lines up against the other players. The other issue, Kent Hughes mentioned that it's not like after those 3 years he's guaranteed to come to North America. It's possible that he can sign his next contract in Russia. Now, talking to the player itself, or the interviews we've heard with the player itself and through his assistant coach, it sounds like he's pretty anxious to play against the best players in the world, and the best players in the world are obviously in the NHL. So that's why Kent is throwing that out is a question in itself. And the other part of that is Kent Hughes said no one in the organization has seen him play live this season. He said, ideally, we like to see him in person, but he said, I think the videos have given us a certain idea and we have enough people to evaluate his game. So a very complicated case and a very cryptic kind of message from Kent Hughes. I think there's a number of ways it can be taken.
Yeah, I think just doing a little bit of scrolling and a little bit of reading, it seems like a lot of media are taking that to mean that they might not have interest in taking Michkov. I don't know if that's fair based off of what Kent Hughes has said. I don't know that that's really what he's been hinting at. But I do like his answer to this. There are a lot of aspects to this. I don't think that this is a simple case. This might honestly be the most complex situation that we've had in a draft in a number of years now. The talent is there. He's going to be good, but like we said, the contract and all the other situations going on with Russia, Matvei Michkov, it's going to be interesting to see where he lands. And if he's available at 5, I think the Canadiens could really be setting the tone based on what they decide to do with that pick.
And I guess just to add to that, trying to determine what he's getting at, I'll just remind our audience that Kent Hughes said, he said it a few times, but he said it right in his opening press conference. He's an agent. He knows how to use the media. And he said he will be using the media to send messages. I guess the question is, in this case, was he being transparent about his draft strategy, or was this a bluff? Was he sending a message to fans? Was he sending a message to media? Or was he sending a message to other GMs? And the only thing I will remind remind myself, I guess, is last year, the Canadiens had the first overall pick. They had complete control. They didn't have to worry about who was going to be taken ahead of them. The question I'll ask is, did Hughes give any hint that they would be selecting Slafkovsky in order to prepare the fan base for no Shane Wright? Because I know a few people have said this is his comments are just. He's hinting that they won't take Michkov this year because he wants to prepare the fan base, because there's a lot of fans who would like Michkov, and he's just trying to let them down easy. Did he do that last year when he had full control and when the entire fan base, the vast majority of the fan base was clamoring for Shane Wright? No, he didn't. So you have to wonder, is this just a message that he's sending to other GMs who are trying to figure out who the Canadiens are going to be picking, and in that way, is this a way of saying, okay, we're not taking Michkov, but maybe we'll take Smith, or maybe we'll take Leonard, or maybe we'll take a player who a team behind them might be coveting, and where they will want to reach out to Kent and say, hey, what do you want? What would it take to get that number 5 pick? And could the Canadiens still get their pick at if they drop down a couple? There's a lot going on here. It's 3D chess. It isn't as straightforward as you think it is. Kent Hughes is up to something with these messages.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to bring up, and I personally, I'm not sure that there was a clear message here to the fans at all, and I'm interested to see how this plays out. I think Michkov is probably the most interesting pick in this whole draft, where he's going to end up. You kind of know where a lot of the other players will end up, but Michkov, he could go in the top 5. He could go in the teens. You don't really know at this point. There's just a lot to consider. Another player that we'd get to hear from is Will Smith. I'm not going to talk about what Kent Hughes had to say about him right away, but I think Will Smith had an interesting quote when talking about the Montreal Canadiens. What he said was, I think I can help the CH thanks to my vision of the game. Obviously, the first player I like to play with is Cole Caufield. We would have fun together, I think. I really do like that from Will Smith, and calling out his fellow American and Cole Caufield. I know a lot of fans do like the Will Smith pick, but Will Smith may or may not be available come number 5. And Will Smith does have some interesting connections with Kent Hughes.
He absolutely does. Kent Hughes coached him when he was much younger, 15 years of age. And Will Smith said that Hughes was a great coach and was the first coach that emphasized the importance of two-way hockey to him. Kent Hughes, it's been a few years, he says that Will Smith has changed, obviously, but he let it be known that he had texted with Will Smith's parents to emphasize that connection that he has with this player.
And did you have any other comments there on Will Smith, or should we go on to Ryan Leonard?
I think that Will Smith is absolutely one of the players that the fan base would be interested in having, but we've seen in the mocks that he may or may not be available for the Canadiens with the number 5 pick.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. And if you are someone that goes and looks at a lot of the mock drafts on The Athletic or TSN and Sportsnet, you do see Will Smith at times can be ranked as high as number 3, or sometimes he's number 5. So it would be interesting to see where he lands. And the talent's there. I've liked what I've heard from him, and it seems like it could be a good fit.
I'm reminded
I'm
reminded of a quote from Jerome Brube from last week's podcast. You might want to go listen to that, episode 246 of the Canadiens Connection. And he said, if you only go on YouTube and watch highlights, you'll be convinced that Will Smith is the best player in the draft.
Yeah, exactly. But another player that I think could be an interesting fit for the Montreal Canadiens is Ryan Leonard. Kent Hughes did have some nice things to say about Ryan Leonard, and quite timely. Kent Hughes compared him to the Kachucks in his style of play, and we know Ryan Leonard's answer to what kind of animal he would be, and that would be a beast. So you think he's probably a physical type player, a power forward. What are you thinking about Ryan Leonard and his potential as a Montreal Canadien?
Well, Ryan Leonard has been a favorite of some of our draft experts, particularly Sam Cosentino, that you need a Ryan Leonard type of player, ultra competitive, and wills the team to win, and especially important in the playoffs. And with Kent Hughes saying Ryan Leonard's name in the same sentence as Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, and on the same, just at the same time that Matthew Tkachuk was scored the tying goal against Vegas to get a win for his team. The images that creates for Canadiens fans, especially in passing on Tkachuk in the draft, this caused a bit of a stir, and as you said, might even change the betting odds for next week. We'll keep an eye on that. But he is a player who maybe a few weeks back, Canadiens fans weren't as familiar with. A member of that important line on the U.S. national development team with Will Smith and Gabe Perreault, who were just dominant. He would be a very interesting pick, and I like this player very much.
I will say, too, doing some reading, it seems like a lot of reporters went out of their way to point out that Kent Hughes' eyes lit up when he was asked about Ryan Leonard. I don't know how much I can really read into that. I think most people's eyes would light up and they'd be excited with the potential of drafting a Ryan Leonard. I don't think that means that it's a sure thing that Montreal would take him. Do you think that Kent Hughes' body language are an indication for anything here, Rick?
Yeah, again, you don't know what's genuine, and you don't know what his purpose is, and his quote was about Ryan Leonard: "You just have to see him play, and his strength comes out right away. He's a guy who plays in the style of Matthew or Brady Tkachuk. He's really physically aggressive. He plays intensely and gives his effort to each presence." That's high praise, and whether that was genuine, whether he's sending a message, we just don't know. Ryan Leonard said he loved the interview. He thought it was a very cordial atmosphere. Thought there was, in the limited time, a pretty good connection. He also knows Kent, and Kent was his advisor as well. So there was a relationship there in the past, and he also talked about summer camps with Marty St. Louis. So there's all kinds of good vibes going on with Will Smith, with Ryan Leonard. Is it genuine? Is it a bluff? Is it a curveball? We just don't know at this point.
I think a player that a lot of people are kind of torn about is David Reinbacher. This is a guy that I think his draft stock has really risen in the past few months. I know that some people had him in the top 10 around January, and it's just gone up and up and up. Some people are saying that he could be a top 5 pick, and that there are some people in the Montreal Canadiens front office that really do like this player. David Reinbacher is someone that does have that top pairing defenseman potential, and he is a right shot. We know how much that is coveted. Hearing in Reinbacher's availability, what he had to say about his play is he said, "I would say that my defensive game is at the top of the things I want to work on. My work in front of the net, the way I get the puck out of the territory, that kind of stuff." So David Reinbacher, I think he's an interesting, I don't know if fans would be upset about this one, but like you and I have talked about a little bit, it really feels like there are some scouts in that Montreal office that are pushing for Reinbacher at 5 potentially.
Yeah, and that's because it's not that Reinbacher has the wow factor, but because defensemen, top pairing defensemen, especially on the right side, are so hard to get, and that's an area where the Canadiens just don't have that player. We've heard Jeff Gorton say a number of times, we still don't have that player in the organization. We need that player, and the only way to get that kind of a player is to draft them. Now, I know that Canadiens fans are kind of pushing back and saying, yeah, but look at all the talented the ultra skilled forwards that are there, and yeah, for me that would be hard to it would be hard to pass on those to add a defenseman. But you understand that some of the members of the hockey ops, the scouting staff, see that this is a chance to get one of those defensemen. And if the Canadiens are going to be improving and maybe even pushing for a playoff spot next season, are they going to be in a position to draft one of those defensemen? We just don't know. So in doing the due diligence, yes, he is a player, obviously on the Montreal Canadiens radar. And here's what Kent Hughes had to say about him.
I mean, I've watched it. I didn't see so much of him at the Worlds as on video, but he's he's rated the top defenseman in the draft for a reason. He's big. He defends very well. He's got a very mature defensive game, which often you see the reverse, right? Like that's the last part of the game to come. He's an efficient puck mover, so he's a talented prospect.
So was he as effervescent as he was about Ryan Leonard? No, he wasn't. But was he guarding his cards? We just don't know. But trust us that Reinbacher is certainly on the Canadiens' radar.
Yeah, I mean, despite the tone of his voice, he did say a lot of very good things about this player. It really does sound like he's got a good idea of what he might get in a David Reinbacher. And yeah, again, this if he is available at number 5 and Montreal is still picking at number 5. It would be interesting to see them take a top pairing defenseman. It's hard to miss on some of those high-end forwards, but sometimes it's not the sexy pick, but sometimes it is very important for a team to go ahead and pick that top pairing right shot defenseman, which you don't always get that, and we've seen some of those just right shot defensemen in general. We've seen some of them move in trades at a premium, first round picks and stuff like that. So I do think that Reinbacher could be a really good fit for Montreal.
Yeah, it's as I said, on the radar for sure, and certainly someone that they are considering.
So what is the draft strategy here for the Montreal Canadiens? Well, it doesn't sound like Montreal is going out of their way to target a specific position, but like I teased at the beginning here, Kent Hughes did say that he is looking for the best player available.
I think at the end of the day, you want the best player available. But if we're talking about different shades of the same color, and you had a team that, let's say, for example, if we were comparing a left shot D to a right shot D and we felt they were both of equal talent, we'd probably take the right shot D. Yeah. So it would be a factor, same if it were a left versus a right shot winger, or if it were a really good goalie and we felt we didn't have enough depth in the organization. But ultimately, we're going to go with the most talented player.
Go with the most talented player.
Sounds simple.
It is. Yeah. All you have to do, if you have a favorite rating agency, is go to their publication. I'll go to what will I pick? The Hockey Prospect Black Book. And I just look up the 5th best player, and that's for sure who the Canadiens are going to take. But let's hear the next clip to see if that's exactly what Kent Hughes is talking about.
There was, like I said before, it's not like we have a report card and we say, hey, this player rates here in skill, skating, sense, competitiveness, and if you don't meet this, or maybe one guy who's just off the charts in skill, but he's not quite as high in another area, but we think that the combination of factors makes him the best candidate, we'll do it. It's not that players have to be perfect and balanced, and that's why, Nick Suzuki's a different person and different attributes than Cole Caufield, but they're two very important players to our team.
This is hugely important because he's saying we'll determine who's the best available, not by a particular skill that they have, not by totaling up a report card of all the aspects. We're going to determine what makes the combination of factors that makes them the best player available for us. And listen, there's no question when you look at that draft strategy. The Canadiens last year said, Kent Hughes said exactly the same thing, best player available. However, did they key in on a team need in size? Absolutely. We heard those discussions behind the scenes. Jeff Gordon was saying, we've got to get bigger. We need size. We need to draft size. Their analytics folks were saying we need to draft size, and we need to draft size early. So Slafkovsky was the best player available for them according to their criteria, and that criteria includes a team need. So this is I think an important point when we start throwing around that best player available tag.
Yeah, I think this is a point where you have to start considering the fit, right? I think best fit available, right? Is that a better way to put that?
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that makes good sense for them. What they think will end up being the deciding factor, the player they decide will end up being the best fit, I think that's still a little bit up for grabs, and very much it's going to be dependent on what happens with picks 1 through 4, that's for sure. I don't know that we really have a clear direction as to where Kent Hughes is going with this draft, right?
The only clue that he gave as far as factors that influence him, he used the word competitive. So be sure that any player that they pick at 5 is going to be competitive.
Yeah, I hope that most players in the draft are somewhat competitive at least. But maybe if you're looking for the most competitive, out of all the competitive quotes I've heard today, I think, Ryan Leonard. But even then, I don't think that that's really how this is going to go. There were plenty of things that were said behind the scenes in the interviews. These guys have spent the whole past year, or like even beyond that, going back years and years and years, learning about these players, knowing everything about them. So I do think that the Montreal Canadiens are going to go in. They're going to make what they believe is the most informed decision. And all in all, like Ken Hughes says, they will pick the best player available for them.
Exactly.
So I think that's a good place to leave it off. We will get to our third segment pretty soon. It's a Have Your Say segment, and I will let you know, so you have some time to think about it during the break, what our Canadiens Connection question of the week is. And it relates pretty well to what we just talked about. The question is, what's the most important quality to you when selecting a prospect? Size, skill, statistics, testing performance, or character? Let us know. We want to make sure we hear from you. And on that note, we will take our final break here on the Canadiens Connections podcast. Stay with us. This is Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio.
The Canadiens Connection is proud to be a partner of Rocket Sports Media, digital media publishers of sports and entertainment websites. Their mission is to build a worldwide network of sports fans who are informed, engaged, entertained, and connected. Learn more about RSM, its team, and its portfolio of brands at rocketsportsmedia.com. I bet you enjoy sporting your best Habs jerseys, dressing up your kids and pets in the cutest Habs gear, and showing off your decked-out hockey cave or fanning. Well, don't just show your friends, show your Habs. The team at All Habs wants you to boast your finest pictures for our global network of Montreal Canadiens fans. Include the hashtag #ShowYourHabs when posting your fan photos on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Then log on to showyourhabs.com to see your entries, along with photos and posts from Habs fans all over the world. A proud member of the Rocket Sports Media Network. If you're a business owner looking for the perfect platform to reach a targeted audience of customers, Rocket Sports Media is the solution. Our global hockey community provides unmatched social media reach to an attentive demographic of sports and entertainment fans. We can provide visibility to your company, helping you to engage and leverage this prime group of potential clientele. In addition, we also offer sponsorship opportunities for fan events and featured areas of website content, giving you name and logo recognition. Visit rocketsportsmedia.com to contact us regarding this unique marketing opportunity. For the most trusted source of news, analysis, and features about the Montreal Canadiens, their affiliates, and their prospects, log in to allhabs.net. your year-round resource for anything Habs related. That's allhabs.net.
Welcome back to episode 247 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. You can follow at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can check out the website, canadiensconnection.com. Also, just a reminder here, you can text us anytime via the Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. We love to hear from our listeners, and definitely make sure you reach out to us and let us know the answer to our Canadiens Connection question of the week, or just anything you have on your mind, anything about the episode that you just listened to, or a previous episode. We want to make sure we hear from you. Just make sure that you let us know your first name and where you're from. That way we know who we are talking to, and we do sometimes read those on air, and we have one coming in a little bit, coming from Antoine in Gatineau. But first, it's a pretty busy off season that we're heading into, and I'm going to let you all the best ways to keep track of these Montreal Canadiens. First and foremost, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Just search at All Habs, and you will find plenty of great content here. You will find the Habs Hockey Report from Amy, but also we started putting a few draft-related interviews into our YouTube feed. Rick, what is it that you will find on our YouTube channel now?
It's, as you said, Amy's, every week she puts out, every Thursday she puts out a weekly video that on a particular topic. This past week it was on the signing of Cole Caufield, and she had actually made a prediction about his contract a few months back, and so you're going to want to watch that. But as you said, for those that want to enjoy our podcast, not only on your favorite podcast app, we're available on all of them, but for those that want to listen to it on YouTube, we've made it available. And there are 3 episodes of the Canadiens Connection with all the draft experts up on YouTube, and be sure to, it's a pretty active channel, so be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything, and be sure you like and comment on the episodes.
Yeah, I always mention that on Amy Johnson's Habs Hockey Report that it's always good to leave a comment because she's always going to respond to them. On some of our Canadiens Connections episodes that we have posted on there, make sure you're commenting on those as well, because we have been going through and replying to a lot of people. We love hearing opinions from all our listeners and viewers, so make sure you reach out to us. And as always, if we like it enough, there's a good opportunity that we will end up reading it on air, just like Amy Johnson does. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to both of our Rocket Sports Radio podcasts on your favorite podcast app. First and foremost, every Tuesday, the Press Zone comes out. You can find that at thepresszone.fm, hosted by Amy Johnson and our AHL guru, Patrick Williams. They do great AHL coverage during the Laval Rocket season. They talk about the Laval Rocket quite a bit, Habs prospects. If you like all of that, make sure you tune into the Press Zone. They do great coverage on that. And also make sure you subscribe to this podcast, The Canadiens Connection. You can find it at canadiensconnection.fm. All the episodes are up there. If you've missed any of our draft experts interviews, you can go on there and you can check those out as well. We're going to be here every single Saturday throughout the busy off season. We know some of your favorite radio stations and other podcasts that you listen to will stop making Montreal Canadiens content throughout the summer, but we keep it going. We always find something fun to talk about. We did this all last summer. We've done this every single Saturday for a number of years now, and like I said, it is episode 247 of this podcast. But Rick, I know you've been doing this for what? Are we coming up on 500 episodes yet?
We're pretty close. Of course, it started, the roots of a podcast started with Habs 360. Chris G with the host back in the 2012-13 season, and Habs 360 ran for 245 episodes. We have, as we've said, 247. This is the 247th episode of the Canadiens Connection. We also have 3 bonus episodes, so we're close to 250 in total on Rocket Sports. We're getting very close to that 500 milestone number.
So, our Canadiens Connection question of the week. What's the most important quality to you when selecting a prospect? Is it size? Is it skill, statistics, testing performance, or character? Make sure you reach out to us and let us know. And that Rocket Sports text line that you can reach out to us on is 5853-ROCKET. You can reach out to us in a lot of different ways, but last week we were reached out to by Antoine in Gatineau. And Rick, what does Antoine have to say to us?
He sent us an email. The email came at hello@rocketsportsmedia.com. And Antoine in Gatineau says, quote, really loved your series with all three draft experts, especially enjoyed hearing from Jerome Berube from the hockey prospect about his job as a scout. Yeah, what does a scout do? A great intro to that segment by Jerome. Antoine goes on to say, great guess. Problem is, I've changed my mind 3 times about the who the Habs should pick, LOL. Which is, thank you, Antoine, a great email. I think it's important there. What's important for me, what I take away, is that we're providing people information that they didn't already have, and not only repeating the same information from the same people or the same sources. These were 3 experts that we had in Russ Cohn, in Sam Cosentino, and Jerome Berube. And they're when we asked them for the top 3 players who should be in the conversation for the Montreal Canadiens with that 5th overall pick, there wasn't a lot of overlap. And so we got really detailed scouting reports on Matvei Michkov, Will Smith, Ryan Leonard, Zach Benson, David Reinbacher, and Dalibor Dvorsky. So for any, if you want to make sure you're ready for the draft, you want to look for those episodes, Canadiens Connection episode 243, 244, and 245 with the draft experts. And listen, as Russ Cohn said, this is one of the better top 10s in the last maybe 10 years. So you're going to want to make sure that you're prepared for the player that the Canadiens select.
So really appreciate the message there, Antoine, and I agree with you. I really enjoyed listening to that part as well. In fact, most of these interviews I've listened to a couple of times just because there are just so many names that they throw out and such good analysis. So I do welcome everyone to go back and re-listen to some of those interviews, get different opinions, because I think the water's a little bit muddy when it comes to who should be the pick at number 5. So definitely you're welcome to go back and listen to all of those and a few times as well. So coming up in the next week, it is going to be F1 weekend in Montreal next Saturday. It's going to be busy, so we'll do our best to keep all the car engine noises out of our recording. But for now, that's going to be a wrap for us. Thank you all for listening. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Canadiens Connection podcast in the player or on any of your favorite podcast apps. Also, you can share it on social media if you liked what you heard today. Enjoy the week, and we'll be back here next Saturday. It's June the 17th already for another great episode. Thank you all for listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Visit allhabs.net for breaking news about the Montreal Canadiens.